has wonderful pictures to show us. I had the opportunity to see one of his presentations a couple of years ago on hummingbirds. It was wonderful. And I believe Anne has a few things that she would like to say.
Yes. Steve Matherly is Dr. Steve Slezik's brother-in-law. I don't know how many of you go or know who Dr. Slezik is, but he's my eye doctor. A couple, 3 years ago, I was in there, and he knew I was involved with Audubon, and he says, I have this amazing brother-in-law. He's just this unbelievable, world-renowned birder and photographer. I'm going, so anyway, I'm being polite. Well, he was not lying, and not lying. I mean, he was not stretching the truth, because what he said is absolutely correct. His brother-in-law, also named Steve, has been all over the world, and he's taken some unbelievable photographs. You're going to get to see a selection of those. And Larry and I have been involved with programs, and we thought it would be awesome if we could get him to come up here, because Steve Slezik kept saying, he'll come and do a program for you. He lives in Houston, right? I'm thinking, well, we can't afford this, but we thought, well, we'll send out the invitation, and he comes up here to visit his family, and he said yes. So he's here tonight, and I'm really excited about it. And I'd also like to mention, Mrs. Slezik is here tonight, and I think Steve is going to show up after a meeting. They are planning to have a little get-together at their home tomorrow, permitting, and so to see more of Steve's work. So if you're interested in that, either see me or see either our guest speaker or Mrs. Slezik here, and we'll give you the information, and hopefully that store will pass us up. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Matherly and his wife, Cindy.
Okay, is the mic working there for everybody? Excellent,
Yes.
okay.
We got one more announcement.
That's right, we
Larry
do.
wanted to talk about the mic system real quick. So,
Real quick.
for those of you
We are trying this experiment tonight with the sound system. We haven't used that before, and that's because the Lincoln Center has a hearing loop. So if you're a hearing aid person and you've got a T-coil in, push the button so that you can hear Steve even better.
Well, thank you all very much for having me up here. Cindy and I had a bonus today. We went down to the Grasslands, and we got great looks at the gyrfalcon down there. It was maybe 30 yards away, and sat there long enough to get as many photos as I wanted to take. And it was incredible, because raptors just don't sit when you try and look at them or even take photos. And also got some great photos of snow bunting, which, yes, I have seen in Texas, believe it or not. But it's a whole lot nicer to see them up here in snow. And you certainly do have lots of snow, there's no problem. This evening we're going to talk about Uganda. Has anyone been to Africa or Uganda? All right, Uganda. Perfect, perfect. So you'll keep me honest here on stuff.
ready for the light yet?
Yeah, you can go ahead and trim the lights back there, Ann, thanks. Uganda, and we'll make sure our technology is all working here. All right, Uganda is a relatively small country in East Africa. It straddles the equator. South Sudan on the north, Kenya on the east, Tanzania to its south, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of those misnamed countries, because I don't think there's anything democratic about it, is on the west. And it ranges in altitude from about 1,500 feet in the north, where the Nile leaves on its long journey up to Egypt, up to mountains about 15,000 foot. What we're going to do in our tour, went there about 5 years ago and spent 3 weeks. Start in Kampala, which is the capital, that's where you fly in. Go to a swampy area that's very close by for a very special bird, which you'll find out about here in a few minutes. Take about a 5-hour trip up to Murchison Falls National Park, up in kind of the north, grasslands, riverine habitat. Go to the Budongo Forest, which is also the home of what's called the Royal Mile. Drop down to Kibale, where there are chimpanzees that we visited. Over to Semliki, where we literally were on the Congo border, which was kind of interesting. And then drop down to Queen Elizabeth National Park, which is beautiful, beautiful national park. And then to the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. And yes, it is pretty much impenetrable, and we'll take a look at that. That's where the gorillas are. And then to Lake Maburo, which has a lot of plains animals, and then back to Kampala. Why Uganda? Well, I like the outdoors. I like birds, mammals, butterflies, some lizards, not all of them, but a few of the lizards. They do have some pretty neat chameleons. But it has a tremendous diversity of birds. And just kind of a basic principle, the diversity of bird species is greatest at the equators, or at the equator, singular there. No real consensus that I could gather looking on the web as to why that is. Probably the best one I've read was climate stability is greatest there, so maybe that helps with the evolution of species and species finding little niches, whereas in the more polar regions, the climate changes that we've had with glaciation and the vast variation over the last even 20,000 years probably has slowed down speciation. I don't know, it's a theory. There's also a wide variety of habitats. There's lakes. Lake Victoria borders Uganda. It's the second largest lake by surface area, second to our Lake Superior. It has swamps where we'll be starting out in the Mabamba Swamp. Savannas, which are grasslands that are interspersed with trees. The Congo Basin rainforest, which brings in a lot of birds from West Africa that you typically won't see in, let's say, Kenya. The Sub-Saharan lowlands, which I really didn't visit, and then mountains, which we didn't visit either. There aren't any roads there. You can't get there, to the best of my knowledge, from a practical standpoint. So this little country that's the size of Oregon, has 1,060 species of birds, and it's landlocked. So it has no petrels, it has no frigate birds, it doesn't have shearwaters, any of those oceanic types of birds. That compares to 967 species in the US and Canada. So tremendous number of species. Makes it a fun place to visit. But it's more than that. There were 5 of us on the trip, and we all of us like birds, but a couple of the guys probably like mammals better than birds. Tremendous mammal diversity. You've got mountain gorillas. There's 750 of them left in only 3 countries, the Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. And you'll see some pictures of the habitat and where the national park ends, and it's a line, kind of scary. You've got chimpanzees, probably our closest relative. The plains animals. You don't have the number of plains animals. You don't have the vast herds like you have in, let's say, Kenya. But you do have something that I think is even better, and that is you don't have all the people. I was telling one of the gentlemen earlier, in Kenya I saw a leopard, and it was surrounded by 23 vehicles. That's kind of not the experience that you really prefer. We saw a leopard in Uganda, and we were the only vehicle there. We were in one of these national parks. We only saw 6 vehicles other than ours the entire day. So it's really kind of special from that standpoint. And I had to trim it out, but most of the reptiles aren't in here except for crocs. Lots of chameleons or some other lizards and geckos and that sort of thing. There's also tremendous variety of butterflies. If we have some time, I can show you some of those photos. We'll see how the time runs here. And then it's a stable developing country. It's, it's not first world or probably second, but I certainly felt safe the entire time. Probably its biggest challenge is the number of people. It's got 35 million people. Again, in a state the size of Oregon, Oregon has 3.5 million people. So pretty high density of population. We're going to start out tonight in the Mabamba Swamp. It's probably only 30 miles from Kampala, the capital. We can see planes landing at the airport. And we're going out to the swamp. And as you can tell, it looks like we've found something here, and it's the shoebill. Shoebill is the only member of its bird family. It's called a monotypic family, so you can remember that and tell people tomorrow what you learned. And so people that like to see all the bird families really like to see this, but it's really, really unique. There's no other bird even similar to it in the world. Is it close, is it a stork or is it a heron? How does it really fit in? It has this massive bill. And it eats lungfish. Now, I don't know why you'd want to eat something like that, but I guess it takes a bill like that to do the job. I don't think they really even understand why the bill is shaped the way it is. So, interesting bird. Other birds we saw in the swamp environment was the hammerkop. It's a heron, but its head looks kind of like a hammer. And pretty unique. African jacana, very pretty bird, and it's a water walker. And more correctly, it's a lily walker. It has very long toes. Its toes are probably 3-4 inches long, and it can walk on vegetation on the surface and not sink in. And there's probably half a dozen species of jacana around the world, including some that occasionally make it to North America. Excuse me, northern jacana comes up from Mexico and gets down into the Rio Grande Valley area. Looks quite a bit different than this. That's a sharp-looking bird. We're going to see a lot of kingfishers tonight, and we saw our first kingfisher, one that I really love, the pied kingfisher. Did I lose the mic here then? No. Is it still on? Okay. There's a weaver nest down there. We'll look at weavers and weaver nests here in a little bit. Uganda has 40 different species of weavers, just to give you an idea. I'm not even sure how many there are worldwide, probably a couple hundred, most of which are in Africa, maybe 3 species in Asia that I know of. But really, really sharp little kingfisher. They love to hover before they drop down, and really pretty. We saw a lot of lapwings. Now, lapwing is a word that they use, or we might call a plover or plover. I'm not even, it's tomato type of thing. I think you even have one of those around here. I've seen signs for it. So, but a lot of these birds, they're usually associated with water, but not all of them. For instance, our killdeer is a plover. And it's a dry land plover. There's a lot of dry land plovers in Africa as well. The wattle lapwing is really unique. It has this yellow wattle on both sides of the bill. Just pretty interesting beast there. Spur-winged plover. Again, these all kind of like the water swampy environment. 3-banded plover kind of reminds me of our killdeer a bit. And then we'll switch to storks, marabou stork. Probably stands for maybe 4.5 foot tall. Pretty much eats carrion, but the other part is I think it eats anything that bill can get a hold of. I'm sure that if it can find a fish or a reptile or anything else, they'll feed not only in water areas, but they'll feed in dry areas. They'll feed in dumps. They soar like vultures, and in many respects, they're kind of like a vulture. But this one was actually, was in the swampy area. The males have this large sac that they can enlarge, and apparently the females find that very appealing. It's probably an acquired trait. Probably one of the prettiest storks in the world is a saddlebill. Now this is a male, has a dark eye, if you notice, the eye's all dark, but it also has these little wattles, little yellow wattles. And beautiful bill, I mean, it's just a striking bird. Look at the knees, these pink knees. I mean, that is a sharp-looking bird. And this is the female, doesn't have the wattles and has yellow eyes. So you can, even we can tell them apart, so. Egyptian geese, fairly common and widespread in Africa. A couple little babies down here in the bottom left. And these seem to be getting introduced into the U.S. periodically, and gosh, I hate to see things get introduced. It always upsets the apple cart. We've got Eurasian collared doves that are starting to take over our feeders, and what are you going to do? Kind of sticking with waterfowl, yellow-billed duck, very mallard-like to me, and of course there's a lot of ducks around the world that are probably have split off from the mallard, and not that far ago. It looks pretty similar. And so from the Mabamba Swamp, then we go up north to Murchison Falls. Murchison Falls, the Victoria Nile comes and goes over an escarpment and some falls here and joins what's called the Albert Nile. And I'm not sure if this is called the Albert Nile in this area or the White Nile. The Blue Nile I know starts in Ethiopia, and I think this is the White Nile up here, but I could be off on that. But it's a really good area. And we'll make a couple trips up the river to the falls here. But pretty impressive falls, pretty impressive flow of water. And we're going to go to the boat. We're not going to land, but we're going to go close to these islands where there's rock pratincoal. Now, pratincoal is a bird we don't have here in North America. It's classified as a wading bird, but I really don't know why, because it's really very tern-like. It looks a lot like a tern, and it flies a lot like a tern, and it captures insects in the air. So I don't know why it isn't categorized with the terns, except I suppose if you do DNA analysis or something, it's closer to the wading birds. A lot of things are still sorting out with DNA analysis on how birds are all related to each other in the different families. Downstream from that escarpment, it gets much flatter, and it turns into more of a plains environment, and it's a grassland or savanna, very open savanna. And the Ugandan cob is probably the most numerous mammal in Uganda. It's an antelope, a little bit smaller than our white-tailed deer. Maybe a large buck is about the size of a large buck Ugandan cob is about the size of say a doe deer here. Not a real large one. But they're really good-looking antelope. And of course, lots of other antelopes that we'll see. Males have horns, females do not. Kind of a cute little picture there. And we're going to see a little bit later, they have a lecking system for mating, much like the prairie chickens. And they literally fight to get to the center of the ring, if you will, where the action is. And we got to witness some of that. One of the things about the Murchison Falls area is elephants are now coming back. I'm sure all of us recall Idi Amin back in the 70s in a very, very dark period of time for Uganda, where there were lots of guns and there was lots and lots of horrible things happening to people, being imprisoned and killed. And even our leader's family, our Ugandan leader, his family was forced out into the bush so that they wouldn't get killed by Idi Amin and his cohorts. And elephants almost were eliminated from Uganda in that period of time. The good news is, as you can see, they're coming back now. And we saw pretty good numbers of elephants. And I think elephants live to like something around 60 years in the wild, so this is a good sign. You'll see a couple birds up here. We'll see them better a little bit later. They're pia-piaks, which are a member of the crow or the jay family. You know, good numbers of elephants. And one of the things elephants do, they're very important in maintaining the habitat. If they weren't feeding on these trees and knocking them over so they can get at branches and greenery at the top of the tree, the forest would probably take over a lot of these areas. So from an environmental standpoint, it's really important to have this balance. One of the pieces of balance that they're really lacking is large predators. We will see some lions, but they do not have a whole lot of top-end predators. That could cause some problems down the road for them. This is a really cute little antelope. It's called an oribi. It's about 3 foot tall. This is a male. It has horns. Female does not. And you'd see them scampering through the bush pretty frequently. And first time I'd ever seen them, there were pretty good numbers of them here. Water buck is about 4 foot at the back, so it stands about like this. You know, kind of like a small cow, not a real big cow. They prefer a little, you know, where the Ugandan cob really likes open grassland, the water buck likes a lot thicker habitat. It's not always associated with water, but you can see a little bit thicker habitat. Giraffes. It was phenomenal. I've been to Ethiopia, South Africa, and Kenya. I've never seen anything like this. We were stopped in one spot, and you could do a 360, and there had to be at least 100, 120 giraffes just surrounding us that I could see. You know, it was just like if you did a 360, it would be like that all the way around. It was phenomenal. And I love the way they walk. Basically, both the legs go forward on one side and then the other. And they just have this real rolling, I guess you call it a gait. It's very fluid. It's really beautiful to watch. Hartebeest is a large antelope that we saw. It's pretty close to the size of a cow, maybe a little bit larger than that water buck. I don't know if its front legs are really longer than the back legs, but it sure looks like it. And that's always amplified by they have this habit of standing with their front legs on a termite mound, and I think it just gives them a little extra ability to see predators. They're usually by themselves, and you'll see them maybe 100 yards apart, and they're always they have to look out for themselves. They don't have the ability of the herd to be extra eyes and ears for them. This is a Sitatunga, which I'd never heard of until I went over there. I had to look it up to figure out what it was. And I mean, look at that camouflage pattern that it has. That's pretty impressive. This is a bird that I really, really like, the Abyssinian ground hornbill. There's 2 species of ground hornbill, this one and the southern ground hornbill. Very similar, except for the color of the skin up around the eyes and that, I think this gular sac or whatever they call it. They're walking around in small groups, 3 or 4 birds, looking for seeds, insects, little reptiles, anything they can find, little snakes, and they just really, really fun to watch out there. And there's a lot of birds in the presentation that are just stunning. And this has got to be one of them, the northern carmine bee eater. You know, two shades of blue and a red that's just hard to equal. One of the things about bee eaters, they have a very long bill, and they do feed on bees that have stingers. That allows it to catch the bee out towards the end. The bee can't sting it. It then goes and will whack it against a tree limb to kill the insect, and then it can push out the stinger and the venom, and it can eat it then. What's really interesting is they have, in a zoo environment, they've hatched these guys, bee eaters, maybe not northern carmine. They've hatched them, and they instinctively have that behavior. It is not a learned behavior, it's a genetic behavior. It's just, you know, kind of mind-boggling how some of that stuff works. Blue-breasted bee eater, it's hard to pick a favorite on all of these. And bee eaters make their homes, they dig a hole in a sandy bank. And, you know, I don't know how many of these had been active over a period of time. A lot of them, I'm sure they started and it caved in or didn't work for other reasons. But you see this periodically on banks, particularly along streams. Gray-crowned crane is the national bird of Uganda, and I think you can see why. Absolutely stunning bird. Gorgeous, whether it's in flight or if it's on the ground. And of course it has that nice little top knot, and the color contrasts are just fantastic. And it's just always a pleasure to see these. And they exist not only in Uganda, I've seen them in Kenya and Ethiopia as well. Just show you a little bit of our transportation. We had an 8-seat van. There were 5 of us, and then our guide and a driver. And while we were at Murchison Falls, we took a boat launch. You know, part of that was to see the rock Pratt and Cole. And here are some of the other things we saw. Beautiful scenery. Lots and lots of hippos. Hippo, if I recall correctly, is like the 3rd largest land mammal after elephant and rhino. Weighs 1.5 to 3 tons. Big, big guys. They call them river horses a lot of times. You don't see them out of the water a lot. We saw, they can look very docile. They look very pleasant and sweet. But it's actually very misleading. They're the most dangerous animal in Africa. They kill like 3,000 people a year in Africa, more than lions. And they kill people really 2 ways. One is if you get between a hippo and his escape route in the water, he literally will trample you. And the other, of course, is these incisors. I guess they're incisors. Sydney, you work with the dentist. You could correct me on that. And they will attack crocs. Like if a croc is threatening their calf, they will attack it. And so they look kind of sweet, but they really aren't. You really have to give them distance. And we saw a lot of them. Here's a little baby. Well, not little, but of course there's other reasons you don't want to go in the water. And crocodile is the other. Yes, these are Nile crocodiles. And this is not a big one. This is a big one. And they can move like 18 miles per hour in the water. The jaw strength is tremendous. You know, once they close on you, you can't get things open. And they're tough characters. They live like 70 years long, which is pretty incredible. Getting back to birds, the African darter, it's a member of the darter family, like our anhinga in the southern U.S., and in fact looks very, very similar. And I believe there's only like 3 darters in the world, but there might be a fourth one in Australia, I'm not remembering. Goliath heron is the largest member of the heron family. It stands about 5 foot tall, has a wingspan of about 7 foot, so, you know, fair amount larger even than a great blue heron. Very, very attractive looking heron. And all this is being seen from this boat, which is kind of incredible. The Senegal thickney, the thickney family, I think there's about a dozen thickneys in the world. They all have these very large eyes because they principally feed at night, and they all look pretty much identical. About the only difference is the color patterns on their wings, these wing panels. And this is kind of a black, gray, black, and this is a water thickney, which is black, white, gray, black. Pretty similar, so that's one of the challenges that you're faced with as you're trying to learn all these birds. In the 3-week trip that we had to Uganda, we saw about 450 species of birds. It's about half the bird species in Uganda, which isn't bad. But again, we couldn't get to mountains. We didn't go north to that sub-Saharan lowlands because it's, you know, a little unstable with Sudan and some of those areas like that. Yellow-billed stork. Very attractive bird. And from there, we're going to go to the Bidongo Forest and the Royal Mile. It was a hunting preserve of the royalty. Uganda actually had a king up until, I think, independence in probably the 60s. I don't have a lot of bird photos from here because it was just too dark, but did get this one, blue-breasted kingfisher. I mean, the kingfishers there are fantastic, just fantastic. Black and white cast hornbill, several hornbill species that we saw. Crowned hornbill. And then we head on down to Kibale National Park, which is home of the chimpanzees. Again, one of our closest relatives in the animal world. He's up there eating figs, and I'm trying to determine, is this a good place to stand, or is he going to throw a fig at me? But he was pretty happy. You have to go in with guides. It's easier to go for the chimpanzees than it is the gorillas. There are more slots available. The chimpanzees are a little bit more habituated. These two chimps came down and they were grooming themselves, and not very far away, maybe from here to the wall. It was quite close, just terribly dark in the forest. Not much light gets down in the bottom. We saw lots of other monkeys. This is the Guareza colobus, or sometimes called the black and white colobus, and I think it's probably the prettiest monkey in the world. It has a real long tail. The tail is probably close to 6 foot long. And it's a big monkey. It probably weighs about 30 pounds, would be my guess. This is the red colobus, a little bit smaller. Lahose monkey. Good diversity. The vervet monkey. The vervet is out more in the plains and savanna areas. And then we'll see, we've got a few more coming up here. We then went to Semiliki, which is right literally on the border with the Congo. And this is the border, and that's Congo over there. And a lot of really special birds. Again, it was very heavy forest, so I didn't get a lot of bird photos from that area. From then we went on to Queen Elizabeth National Park, which is similar to Murchison Falls in that it's fairly open. It has a lot of these crater lakes. There's a lot of volcanic activity historically in Uganda. When I say historically, I'm talking millions of years ago, nothing active, in mankind's time period. But that was a crater lake, and Ugandan cob again are very common here, and they have these leks, and the favored area for meeting your mate is at the center of the lek, but you've got to fight your way to get there. And these males would be about every 30 yards apart, and fights would just break out continuously. They were short, but pretty intense. I'm going to show you a fight sequence that lasted almost 5 seconds. I can tell it because I've got the time on the photos. Nobody seems to get hurt except egos, but it's pretty intense. And they'll be standing there, everything's fine, and all of a sudden it all breaks loose. I didn't see anybody get hurt now. And the female, of course, is just sitting there going, ho hum. This is just the quarterfinal. I'm not that interested yet. And finally, the guy on the left backs off, and it's all over with. Again, that lasted 5 seconds. In that very area, the collared pratincoll, another one of these birds that captures insects on the wing, is nesting in this very, very short grass. How they keep from getting smashed, I have no idea. This is a really interesting bird. This looks like a western meadowlark to me. But yet it is completely, totally unrelated from a bird perspective. In other words, it's no closer related to our meadowlark than, say, one of those hornbills. But what it is, it's a grassland bird, and it's called convergent evolution. In other words, in a grassland habitat, that apparently is a really good color to attract a mate, yet you've got that brown back like a meadowlark, and you can hunker down in the grass and not be seen by a red-tailed hawk or whoever else is flying around. And kind of interesting. Saying to the interesting birds, pintail whita, that's basically a sparrow-sized bird, house sparrow-sized bird, with a tail that's what, 4, maybe 5 bird lengths? And when it flies, it can't fly level. It's always flying with its head up and its tail down. It's kind of interesting. The female is just brown. Now, you may think that from all these photos that all the birds in Uganda are really, really unique and brightly colored and special. And I just had to show you, no, that's not true. Here's rufous snake lark. And you can see that it doesn't have a rufous snake, just like a ring-necked duck doesn't have a ring neck. I don't know how they came up with rufous snake, but these grasslands have a lot of larks, true larks, that really kind of fit the same as our sparrows and meadowlarks. Gray-headed sparrow is also in this habitat. You can see very, very short grass in this area. African buffalo is quite common in this park, and I have never seen one yet that looks happy. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if they don't like grass or what it is, but they just don't look happy. These are those pia-piaks, and you can see they kind of look like a blackbird, but they're actually related to crows, magpies, and jays. That's the family that they're in. And pretty unique. Not real close up, but red-billed oxpeckers. And these birds like to hang around on the backs of these animals and pick insects and ticks and that sort of thing off. Topi, kind of similar to the hartebeest that we saw earlier, and probably doesn't have quite the same long-legged appearance in the front legs, but there's still a little bit of that. This was an animal I didn't even know existed until I went over there. I'd seen warthogs before, but this is a giant forest hog, and it actually looks more like a pig than the animals that we're used to seeing the warthogs. And here are the warthogs, kind of for comparison. Olive baboon, saw lots and lots of troops of olive baboon. You'd see males going by, and they have these yellow eyes that kind of stare through you. It's a little bit weird looking at one. And I love the way the little ones ride on their moms. I mean, this is kind of the Western style. This is the underneath style, side saddle. And this is just hanging on. Just to give you an idea of some of the lodges that we stayed in, this was one of the nicer ones, Mawea Lodge. It's in Queen Elizabeth National Park. There are two lakes there. This is Lake Edward, which flows into the Albert Nile. And there's another smaller lake called Lake George, and they're joined by this Kazinga Channel, which is about 18 miles long, very large, wide river. And we'll look at the animals along it in a second, but just in the gardens there, common bulbul, brimstone canary, laughing dove, about the size of our mourning dove, very attractive. Swamp flycatcher. I just want to mention, you've seen a couple of times this plant that kind of looks like a cactus. It's a euphorbia. It's not a cactus. And it has this poisonous sap that basically keeps grazing animals from grazing. It's very caustic. It will burn their mouths. If they break one off, it'll take their hair off. It's something you don't want to mess with. Doherty's bush shrike, closely related to the shrikes that we know that are basically black, white, and gray. But the bush shrikes are all very brightly colored. They eat insects and small reptiles. Black-headed conolec, another member of the bush shrike family. And one that's really fun to watch is a speckled mouse bird. It's probably about 6 inches long with about a 12-inch long tail. And it runs through the branches and really looks like a mouse with that long tail behind it. Looks like a mouse's tail. White-browed robin chat used to be put in with the thrushes. Now it's put in with the flycatchers, so they're not real sure where it fits. Streaked, it should be streaked seed eater, not streaky. You can't spell sometimes. Olive thrush. I mean, look how similar that is to our robin. Same family, same genus, in fact. Yellow-rumped tinkerbird, which is closely related to the woodpeckers. Pied whitetail, nice black and white bird. Great blue turco. This is kind of a, say a hen pheasant sized bird, maybe about 18, 20 inches long, and very pretty blue, nice little headdress that it has up there. Eats leaves, buds, flowers. Ross's turco. It has the red top knot, and it has lots of red in the wings, which makes it kind of unique. In that same basic family, the eastern gray plantain eaters, which have a look on their face that I can't really describe. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. They look very satisfied, though. The barefaced go-away bird, basically, it gets that name. It's kind of a watchdog, and if you get close, it's going to make a bunch of noise that basically says, "Go away, you're bugging me." And then I mentioned that Kazinga Channel, lots of buffalo, hippos, probably closer than we should have been. Speckled pigeon, couple species of cormorant, long-tailed, and great cormorant. Great cormorants pretty much around cosmopolitan around the world, although there's a lot of variation on them. A couple birds very closely related to our bald eagle, the African fish eagle. I mean, it's very, very similar. And they do love their fish, and there's got one. It was hard to train him to do that, especially in 3 weeks. But, African harrier hawk, eagle-sized bird that basically preys on weaver nests. Gray-headed gull. That's an inland gull, it's not really an oceanic gull. Sacred ibis. 2 species of pelicans, the great white pelican, nice yellow pouch, and the pink-backed pelican. Both of those are adult birds. African spoonbill, very similar to the roseate, just colored differently. African skimmer, very similar to the black skimmer that we have on the Gulf Coast. You could see, even here, you could see the upper mandible is shorter than the bottom, and it opens its mouth, and that bottom mandible will just skim the surface, and if it detects a small fish, snaps it shut, and it has a meal. From Queen Elizabeth then we go to windy impenetrable forest, and that's where the gorillas are. But on the way, you're gonna look at some weaver nests. I mean, this looks like a Christmas tree almost. There are 40 species of weaver in Uganda, and each one of them has its own style of nest. I can't identify the nests. Lesser mast weaver here, and they're generally in a colony like we saw in that one big palm tree. And it makes a little tube, and then the nest chamber for eggs is right there. And the male will make the nest, and if it does not meet the satisfaction of his lady friend, she will literally tear it apart. And he gets to start all over again. And these are woven together, they're knotted together. Very intricate, slender-billed weaver. And I think he's got his bill tied together there now. Yellow-backed weaver. Northern brown-throated weaver, that's the male. And then the female. And this is the leopard I mentioned. We didn't have a single car looking. And we just sat there. We kept hoping that he would open his eyes, but he never did. He was just pretty happy. He's in one of these giant euphorbias. And that seems to be the natural way to sleep. But there's a few places in Africa where the lions have learned that the best place to hang out during the day is get off the ground, go hang out in a tree. And it's really helped by these giant branches that branch on, and I don't know what kind of tree it is, but they branch very low in the tree, and they tend to be very horizontal branches. And we're almost underneath this thing. We're in the vehicle. But it was a little bit discomforting. We had that little pop top, you know. I guess that would protect us. No, I don't think so. And he decided to come, or she decided to come down, so we decided to leave. But there were 2 or 3 lions in that, all in that one tree. But this is a volcano in Rwanda, across the border, where there's also gorillas. But this is the habitat, very, very heavily forested, very, very steep. And before you go, you have to go with guides. Generally takes anywhere from 2 hours to 4 hours just to get to the band of gorillas. These bands have been habituated with people so that, maybe over a 5-year period of time, they get them used to having people around. You can't use flash photography. You can't have any food with you. There's some diseases can probably cross between gorillas and people back and forth. So, like going to the bathroom, you've got to dig a hole, some all kinds of rules. So they give you a talk for about an hour about the rules. One of the rules is with the big silverbacks, if he starts getting grumpy, don't have eye contact. You know, break eye contact and back out of there. You cannot approach them closer than 7 meters, which is about 21 feet. That's pretty close. And again, you have porters, and this is one of the porters, they have these tall bamboo canes to help. You know, they're literally helping you get down the hill. It's all stinging nettles, vines. It truly is tough going. I probably couldn't have made it out of there, except 2 of them were basically pushing me back up the hill, because hills are pretty steep, but it was well worth it. It took us about 2 hours to get to the gorillas, and this was the first one we saw, and it was like, you know, I think his attitude, now that I look at it, it's like, oh no, not another bunch. And they know you spend an hour with them, and they kind of know when the hour's up, and they just go wander off. But they tolerate you. Now, if they come closer than you, they can come to you and get closer than 7 meters, which fortunately didn't happen. But we did have a situation where a baby came down out of the tree, and I'll say the baby was like in people years, a couple of years old, and it ran to the group clapping its hands. And one of the females did this, and it just did a 180, much better than my kids ever did. And it went right back to mama. It was pretty, I mean, there's a gorilla there. You know, I'm probably not more than 30 foot away, and just to show you how dense and thick it is. And it was really a challenge to try and get, you know, even though you're close, to get a clear shot. It's like you can't do it, can you? But to look in their eyes, I mean, it's like looking at a person. It's hard to describe. It really is. I mean, they're thinking about you while you're thinking about them. Trust me. And this was one of the young ones up in the tree. Here's the problem. There's the national park. There's the border. And with a population that's doubling about every 20 years, I can rationalize trips like this, that at least the locals get some money, and there's some incentive for them to save the habitat and the gorillas. But, you know, when you get down to 700 animals left, and they're in separate populations, you know, they can't go from here to Rwanda because they're going across people's farmland, and, you know, people get all upset about that, because, you know, the gorillas have to eat, and they're gonna tear up the banana plantations and that sort of thing. You know, the genetic diversity starts dropping off. It's not good. So anyway, yeah. I mean, the boundary of the park is like right here, and that's what it looks like. So from there we head to Lake Mukuru, and we have quite a few plains animals, although it was fairly thick and brushy. Those were an impala, bushbuck, and of course zebra. Again, you don't see the big herds that you see in Kenya, but I think we only saw one other vehicle this whole day in this park. So you get close and the animals aren't afraid of you. This is a finfoot, African finfoot. Some of you have probably seen or at least heard of the sun-greaved in Central and South America. It's the same family. There's also a masked finfoot in Southeast Asia. So there's only 3 birds in this one family. So it's really kind of neat to see. Spur-winged goose. You know, we've all heard how birds have evolved from dinosaurs, or they're living dinosaurs. Look at that. Yes, that is a spur coming out of his wing. And it probably does go back to, you know, some reptilian type background. I mean, it's there. Now, as I mentioned, we saw lots of kingfishers, and we'll go through a bunch of them here. This is the giant kingfisher. It's about 18 inches long, which is the largest by size of all the kingfishers. Laughing kookaburra in Australia is probably a little bit heavier. This is the smallest. This was both on the same lake, the largest and the smallest. This little guy's about 4 inches, African pygmy. It's a little bitty tiny thing. You know, seeing them is not easy. I think our guide found it. One of my favorites, and I still don't have a picture that does it justice, but the malachite kingfisher, probably about 5 inches, 6 inches. Beautiful, beautiful back and crown. That's all iridescent. And they seem to love blue. Gray-headed kingfisher, striped kingfisher, and real pretty blue wings. Woodland kingfisher with that bicolored bill, which I think is just gorgeous. And then moving into raptors, the black kite, which is probably the most common raptor in the world. Augur Buzzard, which is really the African redtail, fairly closely related. Wing shape is pretty different than a redtail. And in case any of you watched any Seattle Seahawk games where they may have been playing, say, the Packers, somebody a whole lot better than them, I think that's their sea eagle that they launch. I think it is. I'm not positive on that. Long-crested eagle. And that may be the longest crest on any bird. When I was in Thailand just last month, we saw a jay that has a crest that is probably, I'm not sure which one is the longer crest. I mean, this is like a blue jay that's got a crest that's 4 or 5 inches long. So, but that's a pretty big crest. Tawny Eagle. Very similar to golden eagle. In fact, basically, and I can't even remember the way you tell the difference is the gape line, how far it goes towards the back of the eye or beyond. I can't even remember the rules right now, but gray kestrel, which is really a pretty neat bird, pretty much the size of our American kestrel. A gorgeous, gorgeous bird, lilac-breasted roller. In their display flights, they literally will roll over and fly upside down. And you've got all these gorgeous colors of lilacs and blues. Boy, they are really pretty. And then getting some of the more common shrikes, the grayback fiscal, common fiscal. It's hard to keep all of these guys separated because they're all black and gray and white. Keeping in the black and white, pied crow, redneck francolin, kind of a partridge-like bird. And and it looks like, I think I've got enough time to do a few butterflies here. Winston Churchill called Uganda the pearl of Africa because of all of its natural resources and its natural beauty. And you can all go to my website and impressionsofnature.com, or you can just do Steve Matherly, photographer, or I don't know, can you do Mary Beth Slazek's brother? I don't think that'll work. You can try that. And then we went with Bird Uganda. That's their website. You can take a look at that. I'll show you. Remember the Dongo forest? I didn't have a lot of bird pictures. I had that kingfisher, blue-breasted. Uganda, there are many people go to Uganda for butterflies as probably birds. And I don't know the number of species or anything, but I mean, these guys are absolutely striking. There must be something in some chemical or something in the soil that they're getting salt or something, some mineral. It was really neat. I mean, look at this. Of course, if you got too close, they all took off and you couldn't get a picture, so I had to be really careful.
That looks familiar.
And then you gotta love chameleons. I just can't do that. And look at this, 3-horned chameleon. It's got 3 horns sticking out. And that's it. So, I think we've got a few minutes for questions here, if anybody has. Any questions? Yes?
What kind of camera do you use mostly?
I started with Nikon, so I've always stayed with Nikon, because you start with one and you kind of stuck with it. Canon, of course, is really good. These photos, I believe, were with the D200. I now have a D300S. And I used most of these were a 300, 2.8, which is a pretty big lens like this. And I didn't have to carry it very much. It was generally in the vehicle, and so that worked out pretty well. It's hard for me to carry that 300 2.8 all day long. I'm usually about 2 inches shorter at the end of the day when I do that. Although it gives much better photos. So, and I may have taken some of those with a 200, a 70 to 200 zoom, but I think most of them were the 300. Other questions?
Are your
Yes.
trips sponsored by somebody?
No.
You go on your own?
Yeah, I go on my own. Yeah, I'm my own sponsor. Yes.
Are there not guinea fowl in Uganda?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Guinea fowl.
We did not see guinea fowl there, but there has to be. Helmeted guinea fowl is pretty common in Kenya. So they've got to be there. We didn't see any. Because there's what, crested, helmeted, and vulturine. And no, we didn't see any of those. Yes, Ann?
Do they have much trouble with poaching and this sort of thing? And look, you said you saw very few vehicles. How do they keep all these people from going into the forest and harvesting these animals and so on?
They do have park rangers in all of the parks. And I think that keeps it down to a manageable level. But that has been a problem with gorillas. I mean, there have been gorillas that have been poached and killed. And why? I don't know why.
Are the rangers armed?
Yes, they are armed, and kind of a cute story. You may recall about 10 years ago there was an incident in western Kenya where some tourists to see the gorillas were attacked by people that came over from the Congo. And so we always had an armed guard with us when we were in those border areas. And one day, we had one guard with us, and there were 5 of us, plus our leader. And one day, we came up upon a group of 2 ladies, and they had 2 armed guards. And so I asked our leader, I said, I don't understand. We have 5 people, 1 armed guard, and keep in mind, he's got like a World War I bolt-action Mauser that would be better for pole vaulting than anything else. You will not see it in the Olympic biathlon, trust me. And so I said, we have 5 people, 1 guard. They have 2 people, 2 guards. Why is this? He says, but ours has a bullet. Which I thought was a pretty good response. Yes.
You see rhinos. I'm reading a book, Lawrence Anthony. Have you ever heard of the Anthony Foundation?
No, I have not.
Well, I was wondering if you saw any rhinos over there.
No, we did not. There may be rhinos in some place. I've seen them in Kenya. I know there's some in South Africa. But they basically have to be guarded 24 hours a day. It's really, really bad. So, no, we didn't see any of that.
Which month did you go?
We went in July, and that was a perfect time. I mean, the weather was it was great. It wasn't too hot.
Do they have a rainy season or dry
I'm
season?
sure they do. I don't know the seasons. I think we were right after a rainy season. A lot of the birds were in breeding plumage, so it was either going to be a breeding season or it just been. I'm not sure. A question in the back there?
Yeah, with 1,000 birds to look at, are there good field guides available, and are they
I use the Kenya, I think it's Terry Stevenson has a Kenya, Northern Tanzania book, and that worked out fine for me. There were some of the birds from that Congo Basin rainforest that are not in that book, and I just kind of had to struggle with those a little bit. You know, green bulls and bulbuls and brown bulls, it was, and they all look the same anyway, but that was a bit of a challenge. Yes?
Yeah, how did you line up your naturalist and your tour? You had a group of 5, you say?
Yes, had a group of 5. One of the people in our group was a professional guide with one of the companies out of Phoenix, Wings, and she had met this person at like bird fair or something, and he really wanted to get them to go over there and see how well he could do in leading, and so that's how that got set up. And I'd gone on several of her trips, and she'd asked me, do you want to go to Uganda? And it turned out I was retiring. I retired like the month before that. And I mean, I worked half-time as a contractor until just this last summer, but I was officially retired then. And that was kind of my retirement present, if you will, was going over there. So that's how that was set up. Now, there are tour companies out of the U.S. that go there, or you can set up directly with Bird Uganda. And there's probably other companies as well.
And you showed that one nice lodge you stayed at. What were the accommodations other than that one? Were they good or not?
They weren't as good as that, but they were very adequate. There was nothing that, the tour companies have a term, basic. Okay, basic means basic. It's gonna be a bed that you probably don't wanna sleep on 3 nights, and you may go, why am I here? And I've been in some of those places before. Usually the birds are very, very good. You can rationalize it. But I would say the places we stayed were all, you know, B quality or above. You know, I never felt uncomfortable in the places we stayed, so. And I've been in other places that it was like, this is pretty sleazy. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Do they limit you on what you can bring in for equipment?
No, I have not run into any problem on that.
How about getting back?
You know, I haven't had a problem with that either. When I first started doing it, websites would say you need to carry your serial numbers and pictures of your gear and everything. I've never had anybody ever question it. But, you know, as you come back into the U.S.
Yeah, I've been questioning going out and had all documents, but then when I came back, they never was like.
Yeah, I just haven't had any problem with that. So most of my stuff, you know, at least right now looks pretty used, so it would be pretty easy to sell that story. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not bringing back something that was brand new, they're not gonna.
Correct, yeah. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you all very much. I enjoyed it.